pretty warm tonight. Ugh. Wrong cam, and we're live. It is 6:53, so before 7 o'clock. Tonight, we're going to talk about 351 Cleveland's, kind of the other guy of the Ford family, let's say. You know, we get most of the discussion is around, for me anyway, for the 5-liter Ford. And then some earlier stuff, not too much 289, although I did run a 289 hypo and a Shelby version, but mostly 5-liter Ford, and then all of the stroker variants of that, and then 351, the later 351 Windsor stuff, lots of Windsor stuff, mostly Windsor-based stuff, but I did do some Cleveland stuff as well. So we're going to talk about that tonight, and then we'll talk about some modifications we made to the 351 Cleveland, and then where we are with the different power levels with, cams and intake manifolds. And then eventually we ran a Paxton Supercharger on one too. No, not very high boost, but still we added some boost to it, which is good. A little boost is better than no boost. So we'll start off with the 351 Cleveland. And what I did was put together I built a couple of reproduction motors, as it were. One of them was a 1971 Boss 351, which that's up, and that's a very, very popular video. So if you haven't checked that out, please go check that out. In my opinion, perhaps, at least of the ones that I've tested, the most powerful of the small blocks. And in fact, that is going to be our poll for today. Is the 351 Cleveland a small block? So the poll for tonight is going to be, is the 351 Cleveland a small block? Because I get that comment way more often than I would imagine. No, the Cleveland's a big block because it attaches to shares the 460 bell housing or whatever their comments are. But my answer is always the same on that anyway, is that it has a shorter deck height than a Windsor. It's a 351, so it's a small block. And I know that technically speaking, guys are talking about, but small block and big block is only a Chevy thing. But that's the way that I designate all of the bigger and smaller motors. And so same thing. So I will keep doing that. I will do that to Pontiac. I will do that to all the ones that people don't want to. I will forever call the 400M a 400M. And I don't care if you don't want me to call it 400M. That's what I call it. And when I say that, everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's just like the nonsense between the motor and engine and all that stuff. But on the 351 Cleveland, what I did was I did two different ones. I did the Boss 351, 1971. Yeah, again, in my opinion, the highest horsepower production small block that they made. Certainly, of the muscle car era. And it's interesting that a lot of people thought that by 1971 that those days were over, that everything else was low compression, because a lot of guys had gone to low compression, but 11-1 on the Boss 351, even in 1971. So it did well. But I also did a hydraulic cammed version, which I called the 351 Cobra Jet in 1970. And that's what I thought it was. It might be an M code 351. It was rated at 300, made a pretty good bit more, which is interesting because it made more than the rated power output. And then so did the Boss 351. The Boss was rated at 330, and the other Cleveland was rated at 300, I think. And so both of those made a good bit more. And interestingly enough, both of those Clevelands made more than all of the hot small block Chevys of the era, the DZ302, the 365 horse 327, although the 375 horse with the fuel injection would make a bit more power than would probably honestly make 10 more. The intake manifolding was better on that. We did run one, so I have a video up on that as well. And then also the LT1, which in 1970, which would have been the hot year, because it still had high compression. They dropped it in 1971. But it had higher compression, but it had a milder cam than the previous small block. So it didn't do it. It hurt power up top. It made a lot more torque because it was bigger than either of the other motors, but it also kind of hurt power having the smaller camshaft. But starting out with the 351 Cleveland, the 1970, I'm calling it a Cobra Jet version. You guys can correct me. That one made 359 horsepower and 372 foot-pounds. So it did well. And it had a 4V closed chamber head. It had the hydraulic cam as a reproduction done by Elgin, I think. I think that this was, I can't remember if it was 10 or 11-1. I thought it was 11-1. It had a factory cast iron 4-barrel manifold, originally designed to accept an auto light, but except we ran a Holley on it. We just put a couple of gaskets on it because the bore sizes are different on the auto light. But we were able to run the Holley on it, and we ran 1 7/8 long tube headers on it because all of the other small blocks that we ran also ran long tube headers. But the Cleveland did very well. And then actually, and so we were that is our baseline, is we're starting out at 359 horsepower. To give you an idea, though, the Boss 351 with the solid cam made 383 horsepower and 391 foot-pounds of torque. So it did very, very well. The first thing I did, though, was we changed the factory cast iron intake manifold for an Edelbrock RPM air gap intake manifold. And it's interesting. It did pick up power. First of all, it went from 359 horsepower to 397 horsepower. So it picked up a lot of power. Well, actually, that was from the Boss manifold, from the Boss 351. So it went from 383 horsepower to 397 horsepower and 400 foot-pounds of torque. But the interesting thing about doing that intake manifold is that these were 4V heads. These were factory closed chamber 4V heads. But when we ran the RPM air gap, the RPM air gap is designed to run with the smaller, not 2V heads, but actually we'll call them 3V heads. But they were designed to be matched to the Edelbrock heads, which are kind of a port size in between a 2V and a 3V. So they were not a good match for, they were not in any way port matched to our 4V heads. They were smaller, but they still worked, and the manifold worked, and showing that manifold design, even when not port matched to the bigger cylinder heads, but it's going the right way. You'd rather have it small on the intake side and then going to a bigger port rather than the other way around. So there's a bunch of overhang, but oddly enough, that also works. We've run regular oval port and even rectangular port intake manifolds on peanut port big block heads. So you get a huge mismatch, and guess what? It still works. It still goes in there. So the next test we did was we put a pretty good bit bigger camshaft in it. We ran a comp cam, which did well. I mean, the thing was, it's got enough. It's like an LS. It had enough cylinder head already. Had a pretty decent intake manifold, so it needed more camshaft, and we put a flat tappet camshaft in it. And this was an XE284H, which was 584, 580, 588 lift, 240, 246. And I think that was on 110. And it picked up a lot of power. So with RPM air gap intake manifold and a 750 Holley and that camshaft, now we were up at 450 horsepower and 411 foot-pounds of torque. And it actually made 410 foot-pounds from 4,200 to 5,300. So for 1,000 RPM spread, the torque output was like within 1 foot-pound. So it had a bit like a really flat plateau there. So we were at 450 horsepower. So it picked up a lot from the camshaft. It picked up good power. And then the final step on the Cleveland was that we added a supercharger. And in this case, it was a Paxton. It was a Novi. I don't think it was a 1200. It might have been a 1200. It's either a 1200 or a Novi 2000. At any rate, it had way more than enough flow potential for the blower to support the power level that we did it with a blow through carburetor. We did it with the carburetor like the Jupiter 2, the little saucer section that Vortex sells, with mounting the carburetor inside there. We still use a blow through carburetor on it, but it worked well. We only ran 8.7 pounds on it, and it made over 670 horsepower and 575 foot-pounds of torque. So this is really not that surprising. I mean, I know guys, we all want to see different things run with boost and different things making power, and all of that's great. And I love doing that because I love being on the dyno and testing that stuff. But the things are going to respond. Things are going to respond to boost. They're going to respond to boost favorably. So if you put a blower on something, it's going to add a lot of power. Put a turbo on something, put nitrous on it. They all do that. But that doesn't stop me from wanting to do new applications like AMCs or the Trophy 4-cylinder or the Metro, the 1 liter Metro testing. I want to do all that stuff, and that's why I continue to do weird stuff. The Cleveland, this one, I think was the first one that I did, the Cleveland modifications when I started going down the road for the factory like reproduction muscle car era motors. That was kind of a fun deal. I really like that because I was always curious to see what the reality is. You get, especially you get old timer guys sitting around talking about stuff, and they're like, "Oh yeah, back in the day, I ran my DZ302 to 11,000 RPM, or my Boss or my Cleveland or whatever." You get all this stuff. Oh yeah, it did all these things, and ran 4s or 2s or 1s or whatever in the quarter. But that's why I like seeing some sort of reality. And if I can test it on the same dyno and then kind of the same configuration, I've tested lots of other stuff, then I can go, oh, well, here's the relative thing. Here's what that did, and here's what these others, here's what newer ones do. The newer ones generally make more power and they should. That's from the 1970s. These are from 2025. We've come a long way since the 1970s. We should be able to make a lot more power, and most of the stuff does. So it's pretty cool. But I like the Cleveland stuff. It was new. Everybody told me the same thing that they tell you. Oh, Cleveland's the bad oiling system. You need to run the remote line. You need to do. I didn't do any of that stuff. We just ran it, and it all worked out fine. The one thing I did like is we ran flat tappet cams. We ran hydraulic flat tappets and solid flat tappets, and all the cams worked perfectly. We didn't wipe any of them out. This was quite a ways ago. But we didn't hurt any of them, which was nice. And they all ran great, and they all revved up, and we didn't get valve float on any of them. Because that's the other nice thing about like a solid flat tappet cam, doesn't require very much spring rate because you don't have a lot of lifter weight there. So all that stuff worked out good. But I do like Cleveland's, and I would like to do some more testing with them. But we do have some kind of fun stuff coming up. How's our poll doing here? Is a 351 Cleveland a small block? 84% are saying yes. Special Agent, what's going on? So we'll see what you guys got going on. More power, 408 stroker. Yep, 351 goodness. Thought it was a medium block. What's the deck height on 351 Cleveland versus Winder? One's 9.2 and one's 9.5. So yeah, small block and big block was a Chevrolet thing. Ford had engine families. How about the 8.2 deck Boss 302? Must be a very small block with big heads. Yeah, the Boss 302 was a Windsor block basically with Cleveland heads on it. Queensland, what's going on? Do higher, lower rocker ratios influence the engine's ability to rev higher, more freely? Minus how lift is affected. High, long lever versus short lever, not lift for each valve that's opening there. No, actually, we've talked about this many times. Rocker ratio actually, or rockers themselves, usually have a negative effect on the ability to rev because they usually add a bunch of valve train weight, and you need to offset that with spring rate or control. Let's see. Lego, new here, just subbed. Welcome. Working on my Junkyard Rescue 2.5 liter VW Rabbit. Is it the 2.5 NA one? Is it the base NA motor that they had opposite the like 1.8 and 2 liter turbo motors? It only bolts a small block transmission, shares cubic inches with other small block. Cylinder heads bolt on to it, and any other small block as well. So even if I'm wrong, I still consider it a small block. I do too. My 3.7 V6 was what, Matt? Was a small block or a big block? But a Cleveland sounds so much better, and a lot better than the newer small blocks. Will they make a 351 Cleveland in a Coyote form in today's world if it's possible? Well, a Coyote already flows what a Cleveland flows, so they do pretty well. And a Coyote makes a lot more than a Cleveland does. Flow numbers on a Cleveland versus an LS. A Cleveland flowed 275 when I tested it. Both the Boss did and these Cleveland heads did. So they flowed quite a bit. And that was at 700 lift. And when we flow a Recport LS3 head, it flows 315 or low 300s. all of the cathedral port stuff, the highest one stops around 250, so not as good as the Cleveland in terms of peak flow. But I didn't look at, I could look at the average flow. It's probably better. And then if you look at the port volume and the coefficient of discharge, meaning the flow rate versus the valve size, the LS head's really going to probably make more power. I've been thinking about what influences a light feeling, free revving pushrod engine without going crazy with Jessel shaft rockers and tie retainers. You need a really, really strong valve train to run lots of RPM. If you want it to be snappy, put a really small clutch and flywheel assembly on it and a light rotating assembly. 4-barrel stock Cleveland in a 90s era Bronco with C6 working out plan. That's cool. Confusion is the M motor, 351 400 had the big block bell housings. They did, yep. Taller deck, 351 Cleveland had the lower deck height and a small block bell housing. And then the on the M motors and the Cleveland motors, the heads were interchangeable. Ford does not have a smaller big block. That answers my question. Makes sense that lower ratio lever would be better for RPM. That's actually not true. If you take a look at the rocker ratio on some drag race motors, on very, very high RPM drag race motors, and take a look at the rocker ratio on Spinal Tap, the one that Ben did. Take a look at that stuff. So you can make it work. It just has to be right. Difference between a Cleveland and a modified block. The modified block has a much taller deck height. I think that the deck height on a 351 or a 400M is over 10 inches, right? It's 10 point something. 10.2. Okay. Trying to figure out if a rear mount turbo system is worth putting on my 2.5 Rabbit. We did a supercharger for the 2.5 VW engine long ago. We sold it to one of the Volkswagen places, and I thought that they were going to produce it. But it worked well. We put a Vortec on it. 351 Cleveland, best small block ever made. Light flywheel is one of the best upgrades for a dedicated fun car if you don't spend time in traffic. Yeah, if you want to make it zingy, it definitely is zingy. If you put I remember when we put the tilt and clutch assembly stuff on our World Challenge car, and it was it felt more like a race motor than even though it was not. It was pretty far from a race motor. How is our poll doing? 81%. When we put the cam in the Cleveland, it made peak power at 6,400 RPM. And you'll note that it started making more horsepower than torque after we put that cam in it. But when we had the stock ones, both the Cobra Jet version and even the Boss one, which had a bigger camshaft in it, a solid lifter cam, that those production motors made more torque than horsepower. And even after we put the RPM on the stock motor, it still made more torque than horsepower. It was really close. It made 397 horsepower and 400 foot-pounds. But then after we did the cam and we made the combination wilder, 450 horsepower and 411 horsepower. And then after we add the blower to it, then it makes a lot more power than torque. About 670 something horsepower and 570 something foot-pounds. So 100 more horsepower than foot-pounds is good. We've done a test going from 2 to 2.5 to 3 to 3.5. I did the exhaust test on a turbo motor, and then I did that video is up, and then I also did a dual exhaust on a 600 horsepower or mid 500 horsepower 6-liter LS. We did a 2.5 inch full exhaust versus a 3-inch, the muffler and extension that we normally run on it. And those videos are up. And Freya, did you have, that's if I'm pronouncing that even anywhere near correctly, did you say that somebody had some G10 MLS gaskets? That's what I'm looking for. I have 2 intake options for my Cleveland, an L-Box Scorpion, 950 Holly or a tunnel ram, and 2 center squirters. I can't decide which one to use. For street use, I might tend toward the single 4-barrel, but I can tell you the tunnel ram will make a lot more power than the single plane does. I've even tested it on a Cleveland. We tested it out on a 351 Cleveland. Lego, there's no link to that because I didn't do a video on it. This was long. Might have even been before YouTube was a thing. Would you say different engines react differently to mods, or can you expect similar results from similar setup from one engine to another? It's going to be different because if we add a camshaft to, for instance, an LS motor, if we add a 224 cam to an LS motor, you might get twice as much of a power gain as if you add that camshaft to a 5-liter Ford, let's say, or an earlier small block Chevy. And the reason for that is the LS has the 2 other things that it needs. It has good head flow and a good intake manifold, but a small block Ford, like a 5-liter Ford, does not have that. So the camshaft can still add power, but it's being held back. The potential gains are being held back by other things. So different combinations will respond differently because of the other things that they have or don't have. That would be me. Yes, we spoke on Messenger before. Okay, yeah, just let me know how much because I want to get a 1 or 2 for my for the turbo motor. Yeah, Andy, there's no more Engine Masters show. Cleveland block looked like an engine designed for motorsports. Very strong looking. I love the 4V heads, even if they were big. Once you add a cam, they show up. Yeah, and there's no, and especially if you're comparing to stuff that we have now is not really fair to comparing it to stuff that was, in its period. And if you look at a Cleveland head or a Boss 302 head and compare that to a small block Chevy head of that era, I mean, it's not even close. I mean, it's 60 or 70 CFM. It's a lot, and it is big, but that's part of. In fact, that's the major reason why I wanted to do the Boss 302 versus the DZ 302 because everyone says the same thing. Oh, Boss 302, they're terrible down low, but it wasn't because Ford used a small camshaft on it. Chevy used a gigantic cam. Their cam was 20 degrees at least bigger in duration, bigger than the Ford cam was because they didn't have nearly as much head flow. They both ended up making similar power. The Boss 302 actually made more than all of the small block Chevys. I always think of Ford engines as a different beast. Yeah, it depends. If you like, I don't think you would get much from putting ported heads, or too much from ported heads on a new Coyote, but you would get some from ported heads on a 5-liter Ford. So it depends on what the particular engine platform that you're talking about, what its limitations are, and the thing that you're changing. The Ford M's have oiling problems. They said the same thing about the Clevelands, and I think that they have a similar oiling layout to the Cleveland. More of a 460 guy. 460 stuff up. I like the Volkswagen stuff. In fact, I was talking to the gentleman with the Metros, and we were talking about adapting a transmission to something. And he suggested doing a Volkswagen transmission. He said there's a lot of them and there's lots of gear sets for them and stuff. Yeah, Andy, I like their stuff. They did good testing. But the times, they are changing. Where are we at? 82%. I think it is. The problem is, I think that people confuse it with the 351 and the 400M. They think that the Cleveland is a big block because it has a big block bell housing. I'm like, it doesn't have a big block bell housing. Only the other ones did. Only the M's did. Do you have video on static versus dynamic compression? No. What did you want? How would you want to test that? I mean, a camshaft does exactly that. A camshaft change is a static versus dynamic compression thing, because you're changing that, but you're not changing. You're almost always changing two things there. Really, a dynamic compression test is a camshaft test. Just a pro valve job on the Coyote. Blend the throats. We did some ported Gen 1 Coyote heads, and they picked up a pretty good bit of power. They picked up like 30 or something, but not like we see from head changes on other stuff, because the Coyote head's already starting out really good. And the later ones are even better. The Gen 3 stuff is even better. Just like the Gen 5 LT stuff. Excuse me. Go from top chat to live chat. Took the puppies for a run today. They're always very excited about getting outside and running crazy, chewing on their leashes, because we must be free. We must be free to chase cats and squirrels and anything that we see. But that's probably not a good idea. I haven't ever run, and I need to, because I've run boost on the Cleveland, and obviously on all the Windsors and on Coyote and on all of the mod motors, and on 5-liter stuff, 351 Windsors. But I need to do boost on a 460 Ford, or even a 429 if I'm listening to Mark Sanchez. Eric, what do you want to see what block do you want to see tested? Which one of these things is not like the other one? And we're good. And we're good. Let's see. I'm going to scroll back and see if I missed any. I'll take a look and see if I think I have the tunnel ram stuff here. Tunnel ram Cleveland. $383 Cleveland. $383 made pretty good power. It was over 500. Test description. Oddly enough, it didn't seem to like the funnel web intake. I think we tried ported heads on this thing too. I know we did a test on the. I know we did a Cleveland or a. I know we did a tunnel ram test. Here we go. This is probably it. Just trying to look up the around a Holley 830 carburetor because that's that's cool Cleveland-y stuff. I think that the tunnel ram was worth like 15 or 20. I want to go 60 over on a 460. That's the nice thing about a 460 is you can make them big. Oh, the Coyote steel block. Okay. Did you say earlier that a flat tappet cam didn't need as much spring pressure and didn't have as much mass in the valve train? Yeah, because the lifter is a lot lighter on a flat tappet than it is on a roller, either a solid or especially a hydraulic roller. Please blow the boat anchor miss out of the question by doing some extensive testing on the 351M and the 400M. I'm going to call it a 400M for forever. Yeah, the 400M that I did, it showed. I mean, a 400 is the one limitation they have, I'll have to say, is it's intake manifolds. They don't have a good intake manifold choice available for them. And otherwise, you have to use the adapter plates. But if you use the adapter plates, then you can use Cleveland intake manifolds, which there are a number of them, and that works. But a 400-inch, it's basically a 400-inch Cleveland if you want to do it. It's a stroker motor, and we know a 400-inch motor is going to make more power than a 351-inch motor because it's bigger. Did you try an LT4 hot cam and an LT1? I have not. What do you think about a 671 on a stock crank 400M? Yeah, I might be worried. The rods are pretty long on that, aren't they? If I supply the motors, would you do a CFM test on two engines with the same horsepower and a different cubic inch? No, because I don't want to be involved in shipping engines back and forth. But we can do that at some point. What do you think about the Cadillac? I have Cadillac videos up. I have Cadillac, specifically 500 Cadillac videos up. Richard, what do you think a fresh 2.8 liter inline six should get in horsepower? NA 150 horsepower, 9.2 to 1. Are you going to run it overbuild, or are you going to run it on the engine dyno? 150 horsepower isn't a very high specific output. Is it like a stock cam and everything? $53 horsepower per liter? That's about the equivalent of a stock 5-liter Mustang engine. Not a Coyote, just a 5-liter Mustang engine in terms of efficiency. 185 be nice, or more on a 5 MGE. What were the NA motors rated at? I mean, I know an NA2J has got to be 200 or more, right? How do you feel about the Speedmaster Cleveland heads? We did use those on the 400M, but they were gone through, though. They were ported, I think, by Bryce, at Dr. J's, and then we put our own and springs and everything in it. Are the G10 gaskets? Are those Cometic? James, I was originally wanting to run a solid flat tappet can with today's oils and having to keep adding zinc. I've been thinking about going with a solid roller. Well, I don't think you have to add zinc. That's only during the break-in procedure. After you do that, it should be fine. You should do the 4.7 liter HO PowerTech engine with boost sometimes. I have seen a couple of those. A VVT 2JZ GE is 230, but it's work to do 200 wheel horsepower. Okay. Were you talking about 150 wheel horsepower or flywheel horsepower? T Myra is kind of the go-to source for that 400M stuff. But how do you not like a 400M? And then why wouldn't somebody put LS heads on a 400M? Because we already know that that if the Ford heads fit, then the Chevy heads fit. Yeah, James. Once it's broken in, you should be fine. I have a 302 with a cam and heads and a 454 that's pretty much stock. That would be interesting to see the CFM differences, assuming they're close in power. You just want it to happen at different engine speeds, right? Scrolling. Old 5 MGE. I think my parents had a Cressida with that motor in it. Toyota. Let's see here. Yep, Dan, 4V Cleveland. Making that big boosted power. $351 Windsor or Cleveland. Well, it depends on what your question is. They made more Windsors and they used them in a lot more things. But if you're talking about making stock horsepower, the Cleveland was made more power. Cleveland heads on Windsor block. Yep. But LS heads on a 400M block. That's what we want. What about 400 Pontiacs, Andy? Forvy Cleveland heads flow over 340 CFM on super stockers. Yeah, you can make them flow a lot. 462 valve or 5 liter or 302 5 liter. You gotta be more specific about what you're asking. For what? I wouldn't swap a 462 valve into a Fox Mustang. I would just keep the engine that's in there. Well, we get to run a blower on the 350 Pontiac and also on the, well, I guess it's a 200, technically a 200 Pontiac, the trophy 4-cylinder. 81% is the 351 Cleveland a small block. 81% are saying yes. Live fast. Got to tell me what you're trying to do, man. How much power you're trying to make? What are you putting it in? Give me some information. You can make either one of those make power. Ever built a 401 Pontiac? No, I haven't. I've run a 400 Pontiac. Or were you asking about a 301 Pontiac, the turbo motor? There's live fast. There's no real general answer there. It just depends on what you're trying to do. Have an off the topic question. That's good. You can ask whatever question you want. That would have been better suited for last night. I work for Travis Pastrana on channel 199. I'm building a vehicle for a next stunt at LS Fest. Well, welcome. Travis is amazing. And I will help in any way I can. Godzilla heads on a 400 Ford. Yeah, the Pontiac 400 is good. Then the next question is the Pontiac 400 a small block? And then all the Pontiac guys are going to come out of the woodwork. JM used the 400 cranks and Windsors. Tony, are cams with tight LSAs more difficult to tune the idle on, leaning toward the Truck Norris cam? The Truck Norris cam, you shouldn't base it just on the fact that it has a 107 LSA. It's really the valve events that do what they're doing. So we can have, and I may be doing a video on this, but you can have 4 different camshafts, all that have the same LSA, but they would be wildly different in what they do. So I wouldn't just look at that fact. Live fast. It depends. The answer is always, it depends. The 351 Windsor does fit in a Fox body, and it's a good swap because it has a lot more torque than a 302. But you have to work. You'll have to work on hood clearance, and then header clearance is a little bit of an issue. But I think that they have swap headers for that anyway. And if a 460 will fit, then a 351 will certainly fit. I searched through YouTube, can't find anything on you testing a 22 RE. Nope, I haven't. I haven't ever run one on the engine dyno. I love the sound of the 7 MGE and the 5 MGE. Was the 7 MGE the turbo one? Was that the one that they put the turbo on? You're going to go read your dyno sheet, Andy? Nothing wrong with rambling about 6 cylinders. I got a couple of them I got to run. Bunty, what's going on, man? Yep, we had a good weekend. Where did our Travis Pastrana guy go? I thought he had a question. Curious to see what they were doing. Live fast. I got lots of 462 valve stuff up on the channel to show you what they do. Lots of cams, lots of intake manifolds, turbos, blowers, all kinds of stuff. It's a taco truck. Cool. We're going to jump a couple 100 feet. I wanted to do my first twin turbo build. Engine's a Gen 4 6-liter with ring gap. Weight will be 6,500 pounds. Josh, you know how much power that you guys need to make? I mean, it's really easy to make even ridiculous levels of power with a 6-liter turbo build. I always like how when they do jump stuff like that, Josh, how they add a bunch of weight to the back to make sure that the thing, lots of stuff that they learned back on Dukes of Hazzard stuff, that because you can see guys nose over when they're heavy on the, because they have the engine. If they have the engine in front, guys try to take jumps on stuff and they nose over and dart the thing in. That's not good. Got to put some weight in the back so it sails properly. And in a bread van, that's going to be an interesting thing. I hope I want you guys to have swing out wings or something on it. That would be cool. But yeah, just let me know. I have lots of videos up on turbo 6-cylinder stuff or 6-liter stuff from 1,000 horsepower to 1,500 horsepower. I can't imagine you're going to need any more power than that. Looking for 800 to 1,000 is a 6-liter with any camshaft in it, the Truck Norris or a hot rod cam, or really almost any camshaft, and then a big enough turbo for that, or two turbos, GT3582s, and you guys could probably get good turbos for it. So anything that's any single turbo that's going to be 600 horsepower range or more, just to give you some leeway when you're doing it. But 1,000 horsepower is really, really simple. Get your hybrid all dehydrated, Taylor. Got a 292 V8 Ford out of my Fairlane. It's in good shape. Nice. They did the 7 MGTE in 87. Okay. Turbocharged inline 6-cylinder, 3 liters. How much power did I make? That's all I care about. They give me a bunch of stuff that I usually don't care about. Equipped with electronic fuel injection and turbocharger with 5 PSI. Come on, guys. Really? $230 horsepower. Okay. Five PSI. Obviously, it needs an intercooler and some more boost. Nothing can be done with single, but wanted to do twins. It looks better with twins. I have the space, but VSR said 67, 66 twins would do it. Yeah, that's going to be more than enough. Just want it to be responsive. Yeah. For 1,000, GT35 82s would definitely get you there, and 30 GT30 76s might get you there. You could talk to Viren. He might have something even smaller than. I think we've done more than 500 with. I want to say that there are 62 millimeter precisions. So I think that if you want something really responsive, you definitely can get that. Yeah, Josh, feel free to, you guys want to send me an email or whatever, I'll help you out. But there's a lot of good turbo guys out there. Talk to the guys, talk to Robert at Force Performance. He's really good too. Talk to Viren. There's lots of good guys out there. The guys from Garrett have like serious turbos. They're obviously a lot more money, but they do things that these other older designs that we get, the offshore ones won't do. Building a 6-liter for drag and drives. Eventually want 1,000 horsepower with a turbo. Can the same camera nest the aspirated? Yes. The turbo doesn't care about with the camshaft. I have a 2006. Yeah, 5 psi is more than 0. That's true. It's just not as good as 10 psi with an intercool. If you have a K&N air filter, do you recommend changing it to a different brand? No, but you just have to maintenance it. If it's a K&N, you just have to wash it and oil it. No, yeah, Dan, 50 would be a lot. 85 Supra with a 6 MGE intake and a 7 MGE turbo exhaust. T3, 15 pounds. Did it have, Jesse, did it have an intercooler on it? Dan, the Supras that we're talking about are pre 2J stuff. I used to jump the 88 Celica in Grandpa's field. Perfect small jump. Get going about 60 miles an hour. Sail over at 4 feet off the ground for a long ways. Did it? Usually a production car, especially anything that's a front engine deal, doesn't jump very well because it wants to nose in. Beller's Garage. Let's see. I don't remember what you asked. I'm scrolling back and trying to find your request. Rebel Driver's Garage. Oh, for the 6-liter, 1,000 horsepower cam on a 6-liter. Yeah, a BTR hot rod cam. I don't know enough about what you're doing. I don't know what transmission you're using. I don't know what specifically what converter you're using, what kind of drivability you want. More information would be better, but a 6-liter a hot rod cam. And if you want it to be more drivable than a Truck Norris cam. Look at Alex's stuff, 5 psi on electric, punches above its pressure. Super 5 psi was easy to get around. Almost all the factory stuff would be easy to upgrade. I don't know how big the injectors were and how much more they would support on that particular application. I'm not too hip on modifying that early super motor, but Matthew, you want to put an M90 on a 2.7 Chrysler? Ryan, 408 small block. Dan, yeah, Cresses would have had that early on. It will be a 4L80, about 3,000 stall, still in planning process, going in a 50 Chevy Coupe. Okay, yeah, then that BTR hot rod cam would be good. Richard, any 32 valve or 24 valve aluminum small block Chevy heads that aren't, well, companies are more budget friendly and smaller or less popular? Use the green screen for topic visuals. I can't do that with the way that I'm doing this. And I don't think that there's such thing as a 32 valve small block head conversion that would be inexpensive. Two V Cleveland build or 2V versus 4V. I would like to do, that's a test I would like to do. I'd like to do a 2V versus a 4V. Because after seeing what we did with the Boss, I honestly don't think that the 4V Cleveland, especially as a 351, I don't know how a 2V is even going to compete, but I'd like to see. Oh, Scott, dude, why don't you just tell me who it was? Yeah, just send me an email. I'll help however I can. But you probably already know, right? I already know what all the answers to this stuff is. Josh, what are you gonna send me pictures of? Richard, do you see the accessibility of E85 going down? I thought that somebody here mentioned that they thought that might be going away. That it would have to do with the farm subsidies, probably, but I can't say for sure. I don't have my ear to the ground on that stuff. Here, Scott, you're an LS. You're new to LS stuff. Yeah, it's very easy to do. As long as you guys aren't bouncing off the rev limiter, it should work fine. Richard, that car is balanced very well. It's my favorite car to jump, or the Mark III Supras. Beater cars both did very well. They made the GT4 Turbo 2-liter Celica 4x4s and 88. Yeah, I know. Those are cool. The Celica All-Track stuff were really neat. Eric from West Tech has one of those. LSX RT versus Trailblazer SS below 3,000. Probably the Trailblazer S, but below 3,000, I don't know that you'll see a big difference. Yeah, Dan, that original ZR1 was a 4-valve head, but that's not going to be inexpensive though. Yeah, overbuilt. The takeoff ramp plays a lot. Overly built. I think that I'll ask the gentleman that comes here that has he's got an 8.1 with a turbo on it and it's stock. He put a small cam in it, but I think he went back to the stock cam, and he's got 350,000 miles on it that he used for towing and stuff. And I can't remember if his was a GT45 or if it was an S475. I'll have to ask him about that, but one of those. Gerardo, what did you have another question here? I didn't see. And if you're asking, if that's the first question, what would you recommend changing when having a lifter problem? My 5.3. I'm also planning on having a cam. So then you put cam and lifters and springs in it. Just finished a 2-valve build for a friend and installed in a 56 Dodge Custom. Flat tops, shorty headers, thumper cam. All that's good. We got 1 minute left, 82%. And Cleveland is officially a small block. And it might even have the wrong cam. Bunty, I don't think you should build it based on the 85. If you put together a combination that has a reasonable static compression and has an intercooler, then and you're running boost on it, then you just adjust the boost and you adjust the timing. If all of the, because if the E85 goes away tomorrow, let's say, the motor's still going to run. It'll just run on 91 or 93. You'll just have to take timing and or boost out of it, and it'll still work fine. 53 Studebaker. Yep. That's a good Bonneville car, Dan. Full restoration. Yeah. Yep, Celic All Track. And on that note, it is time to go. I'll be back tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow should be the first normal video, not like non-live feed video. I got one that I'm working on for tomorrow. So hopefully I'll get that up, and I will see you guys all tomorrow.